Predictive programming is a subtle yet powerful tool used by media and entertainment to shape the public's consciousness and soften resistance to future agendas. This technique involves the strategic placement of symbols, themes, and scenarios in movies, television shows, and other forms of entertainment that subtly prepare the audience for real-world events, policies, or shifts in societal norms. Over time, these elements become so familiar to the public that they seem inevitable, as if they were always part of the natural progression of society. By presenting ideas and concepts in a fictional context, predictive programming allows these notions to bypass the critical faculties of the mind, embedding them in the subconscious and making them easier to accept when they eventually manifest in reality. The process begins with the gradual introduction of specific symbols and narratives in entertainment. These elements are often tied to themes of crisis, transformation, or control, aligning with the societal changes that are being pushed behind the scenes. For example, dystopian movies often depict authoritarian governments or surveillance states that reflect the very systems being implemented in the real world. By repeatedly exposing audiences to these concepts in an entertaining or emotionally engaging way, the media conditions the public to view such developments not as threats, but as inevitable and necessary responses to larger problems. This process makes the audience more likely to accept future policies or events that mirror what they have already seen in fiction, without questioning the broader implications. As these themes and symbols are repeated, they begin to shape the collective imagination. In this way, the audience is not only desensitized to the potential consequences of future events, but they are also primed to embrace them when they occur. The predictive programming can be so ingrained that people may not even recognize it as a manipulation when the real-world scenario unfolds. In many cases, the media, intentionally or not, conditions the public to accept new realities, whether it's surveillance technology, restrictions on freedoms, or shifts in social behavior, by presenting them in a familiar, almost comforting context. The use of familiar characters, settings, and narratives makes the process of social engineering seem less intrusive and more like a natural progression. The power of predictive programming lies in its ability to bypass critical thought and appeal directly to emotion and instinct. Because entertainment often invokes strong emotional responses, it creates an environment in which people are more willing to accept new ideas without skepticism. When these ideas are repeated enough, they transition from being perceived as fictional or fantastical to being perceived as plausible or even desirable. The more the public consumes content that normalizes certain ideas, the more these ideas begin to shape their worldview, making them more susceptible to the agendas that will eventually unfold. On a psychological level, predictive programming takes advantage of cognitive biases, such as the mere exposure effect, which is the tendency for people to develop a preference for things simply because they are familiar. The repeated exposure to certain symbols, ideas, or scenarios makes them feel less foreign and more acceptable, even when they may contradict previous beliefs or values. This effect makes the public more likely to embrace the agendas presented in media because they have already been subtly conditioned to view them as normal or inevitable. Real-world examples of predictive programming can be found throughout media history. Films like The Hunger Games and 1984 have depicted dystopian societies that reflect increasingly authoritarian structures seen in the real world. The use of surveillance, control, and the suppression of individual freedoms in these stories mirrors the growing societal trends toward increasing monitoring and government control. Such depictions plant the seeds of acceptance for these developments, presenting them as a larger narrative rather than isolated, potentially harmful events. These examples show how the public is often preconditioned to accept drastic changes in society because they have already seen them play out in fictional worlds. The role of media consolidation amplifies the effects of predictive programming. In an era where a handful of large corporations control much of the content people consume, there is little to no alternative narrative presented. These corporations can push a unified message across various forms of media, television, film, news, and online platforms, ensuring that the same themes, symbols, and scenarios are widely distributed. This uniformity ensures that predictive programming has a far-reaching influence, as individuals are exposed to the same narratives across different media channels, reinforcing the ideas being planted in their minds. Moreover, predictive programming aligns closely with larger cultural and societal shifts. As entertainment continues to depict themes of crisis and control, it mirrors the actual challenges society faces, whether it's increasing normalization of surveillance technology or the portrayal of police states as necessary for safety. Media narratives often pave the way for such policies to be accepted. These shifts are not presented as radical, but as logical outcomes of the problems society faces. By embedding these ideas in the public's consciousness through entertainment, the media makes it more likely that future policies, which might otherwise be met with resistance, will be accepted without question. Through the consistent use of predictive programming, media and entertainment become an extension of the social control apparatus, guiding public opinion and preparing society for changes that may be controversial or undesirable. This method works because it taps into the human tendency to accept what is familiar, even when it contradicts logical or objective reasoning. By embedding these ideas in entertainment, the elite interest behind such programming can ensure that when their agendas are finally realized, they will face little resistance, as the public has already been preconditioned to accept them.